Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Zoom version of Roxborough House Roundtables. Today, Ali Warren will be our host. She'll introduce her topic in a moment. There she is. My name is Evan Lane. I'm the director, and this is our senior class graduating, doing their capstone. And we have a special guest, one of the founding fathers from Law and Society, Danny Arroyo, and he has some very good credentials to talk about Title IX and so forth. He works in higher education. So with that, I turn it over to our host, Ali Warren.
Okay. Hi, Danny. You obviously don't know who I am, but I'm Ali. Lane has told me that you are like an expert kind of on these things. So if I'm wrong or my information is out of date, please, and everybody else too, feel free to jump in. It is a roundtable. I'm going to share my screen because I did prepare like a slideshow for this just so I could kind of keep things more organized for myself because it is a little bit of a lot. So just give me 1 second. I don't know how to do this. We're gonna figure it out. Okay, can you see it?
Let me see. Not yet. Here it comes. You did it.
I did it?
It's coming. It says started screen sharing. That's a good start.
Okay.
And there it is. Yay. Okay.
Okay, good. Okay. If that doesn't work, we'll just leave it how it is. It's not that important. That's full. But
if you stop sharing your screen and you present and then you share your screen, it'll be full screen.
Dang it, that's so annoying. All right, we're just gonna leave it this way if that's cool with everybody, because that's just a lot. Okay. So for my topic, it is something that I think is very important to me. Oh, here we go. Hi. What's happening? We're just gonna X out of it.
Okay, while we're getting the shared screen up, just remember, we can't talk over each other like we do at all other roundtables because it doesn't work in Zoom. So just try to go one at a time. And Ali, if you can, try to control it that way, and I'll do the best I can. Okay, you ready?
And like people who have shared the screen, it only gives me like myself and 3 other people, so I can't see everyone that's here. So just like say something and we'll go from there. But so I think that this issue is extremely important. It's consent and sexual assault or rape on college campuses. The way I have this formatted, I wanted to break it down into just like a quick little outline of what I want to be talking about. We're just going to briefly go over like what is consent, how the state of Pennsylvania defines it, as well as like how our university looks at it. Same with sexual assault. A big part of this are the stigmas. I'm going to go over my SurveyMonkey results, our university's policies, and then end it all with our like plan of action and how to move forward. I entitled this and the link that Lane sent to all of you, welcome to the conversation, because I do want this to be like a conversation, a roundtable type of thing, not just me spitting facts out. So if anyone has any questions about anything or anything like that, feel free to jump in. So moving on, what is consent? So from everything that I've gathered, there is no like national definition in the eyes of the law. It's each state sets its own definition of what consent is. But I did come across something that said that there are 3 main ways to kind of analyze it and put it into perspective. It's broken down into these 3 categories: affirmative, freely given, and capacity to consent. For affirmative, it was, did the person express overt actions or words indicating agreement for sexual acts? I've italicized that because I've italicized indicating because I just think that it's interesting because unlike the next 2 that we're going to discuss, this one kind of goes off of reading signals and kind of judging based on body language more than it is focused on like actually giving consent and saying like, yes, I want to do this, or yes, this is okay with me. It's very different from freely given consent, which is consent offered of the person's own free will without it being induced by fraud, any type of coercion, or a threat of violence. And then capacity to consent is, did the individual have the capacity or legal ability to consent? What that means is just like, did they have any, like, whether they're permanent or temporary, like mental or physical abilities that would prevent them from giving consent, or something more along the lines of statutory rape, which is, did they even have the legal ability to consent? I'm pretty sure, we're law majors, people know what statutory rape is, but just a quick thing. It's when a person who is not of age of consent, which in the state of Pennsylvania, I believe it's the age, you have to be at least 16 to give consent, is when they partake in a sexual act with someone who is of legal consenting age.
I'll ask you a question because right away I'm confused by the wording, which is not you, but it's the lawyers who write this stuff. If someone, say, is at a party and smokes a joint, okay, and you don't know it, and now you're with them and they consent, but you don't know they're stoned, but they later say, hey, I was stoned or I was drunk, whatever it may be, and you, the other person involved in the situation, doesn't know that or have reason to know it. Is that a lack of consent or not?
That's where the line gets blurred. It's situations like that fall under the lines of like when you're trying to figure out if it was consent. Like, it's so confusing because it falls under like affirmative consent. You're trying to read their body language, and it's the same if someone was drunk or under the influence of some other drug and you did something like that. It unfortunately really comes down to what that like victim or what that person feels like, if they felt like they were taken advantage of or if they felt like this person genuinely didn't know. And in the end, something like that comes down to if that person wants to pursue legal action because they took advantage of them, or if it was just like an honest accident they didn't know. And that's really where it just gets so icky, in my opinion.
I'm looking at where is the onus, where is the focus? Is it on the intentions of the person who is claiming that the other person had consent, or is it on the person who's claiming they weren't capable of having consent? Yeah, that's what this really confuses me on this issue.
When I was reading this article, I got this. There were two similar articles, but they both had these three things, which I thought were interesting. One was from the Pennsylvania Coalition Against Rape, and the other one was from this one other like organization called RAIN. Basically, all of their definitions are from the view of the victim, like quote unquote, or the person who feels as though they were taken advantage of. And it's so confusing because if you look down like at the bottom, the state of Pennsylvania defines consent in their whole definition, at least in the sources that I found. They defined consent as acquiescence of compliance with the propositions of another. And that is so general and confusing, especially if you don't. I had to look up the first word.
Just to go to the panel for a second and then go to our older expert as opposed to our younger expert here. Are you guys confused? Because you're probably faced with this situation or friends with it. Is it confusing or scary to you that these are so vague, these terms? Kate, how about you?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's definitely like something that's scary. I think it's something that like we all think about. I know like as girls, we all think about it a lot. I'm sure like guys think about it too. So I think it's definitely something that, because it's so vague, it's so like hard to know, I guess, exactly like what like is the right or like the way that it's gonna go.
How about you, Tony? What do you think?
I think what it comes down to is the different genders' point of views, because we're here talking about taking the point of view from the victim, and the victim's usually the girl, so that would create precedent. But there have been times where it's not the girl and it is the guy, and it's like people you don't really know what to do. They handle that completely differently. So I feel like if we have one actual structure of how to deal with these issues, it would be better for everybody as well.
And of course, remember, it's just as prevalent in same sex as there is in opposite sex situations. Am I correct on that, Allie? That there's definitely, goes across the board.
Yep, and I'm really glad that like Kate and Tony brought up like the male perspective of it, because that is why I like entitled it like "Welcome to the Conversation," because, and I'll get to it later on in the presentation as well, there is such a stigma around this topic that like all men are the predators, it's always the woman, and that men can never be the victim of like an assault or a crime like this. And I think that a big part of this project, if like another class does want to take it on, is to help try to break that stigma. And even though like I have statistics that will show it is obviously more prevalent with women like being the victims than males, like that does not mean it does not happen to men as well.
Danny, are you faced with these issues in your job? And if you could explain your job to us first.
Yeah, so I'm the assistant director for residence life at a small private college in New York. And part of my role is to serve as a Title IX investigator. And so Title IX is part of the Educational Rights Act, which prohibits sexual-based discrimination or sex-based discrimination. And so sexual misconduct and sexual assault kind of falls under Title IX, but Title IX is just one sentence and doesn't actually mention assault or anything like that. So it's a little vague there. When we do investigations, or when I am in my previous positions, I've served as an advisor to students who are going through a sexual misconduct process to explain to them the policies and the procedures. Consent usually is defined either by the state or by the institution itself. So you find that at a public school, it would be the state's definition. At a private school, it can be the state's definition, which is the minimum, just like the federal law is the minimum. But the college can define consent further and has the ability to do that. So affirmative consent for us really means yes means yes, and only yes means yes. So you have to clearly indicate that on every step of the way throughout any sexual encounter, right? So you have to get consent for kissing, moving down to touching, any sort of penetration, every step of the way, and it can be withdrawn at any step of the way. In terms of some of the other earlier questions about capacity and being intoxicated, the way that at least most colleges view it, and I'm pretty sure the law views it as well, is we're looking at one, legal capacity, so whether or not someone is of the age of consent, or if they are mentally disabled, can they freely give consent? Are they of that capacity to give consent? Or prisoners, right? Prisoners don't have a legal capacity to give consent to if the aggressor is the guard. When we get to intoxication, the standard typically is incapacitation by a substance, whether that's alcohol or drug. And so you can be intoxicated, a little buzzed, but not incapacitated by alcohol, where you can't make decisions. So that is where the line gets a little blurry, and where, as investigators and folks going through some of these processes, we are looking at fact-based information. What information do we have that says that this person is reasonably incapacitated by alcohol or another drug, if that makes sense to everyone. So the onus is really on us as investigators when we do investigate these things, to try to gather the facts from both sides to say, based on all the information we have, is this more likely than not to have happened? The problem is that oftentimes, particularly in a college environment, these things happen around substance use, drugs, and alcohol, and the recollections of both parties aren't always, complete. And so we got to do the best we can.
I just have a question off of that.
Yeah.
So let's say like you were given a scenario or a situation where both people were heavily intoxicated, and then like the next day accusations of this person assaulted me started to occur. What steps would you take for that?
Well, I mean, we would, if either party comes forward and reports it, we have an obligation to do a little investigation of it. But what could happen, and what sometimes does happen, is that we may determine that both parties didn't have the capacity to give consent, right? And so at that point, you're kind of at a lose situation, right? Neither one could really give consent, so neither one could really be responsible. I haven't seen that personally, but in kind of like trainings and those scenarios, that's kind of the thinking behind it. But more often than not, that's not really what happens. I will say what does happen, and I've seen it pretty much every step of my career at every institution, is that more often than not, people assume that they have consent, and they didn't. And that's where affirmative consent comes into play, right? The reverse of affirmative consent means like just no means no, right? Everything's fine unless you say no. You know, affirmative consent really means that you have to say yes. You have to give a clear indication, and that could be through words or actions, or moving someone's hand in a certain direction or initiating certain things. But yeah, I've seen that more often. It's people who thought X and Y were happening already, so I assume Z would be okay. And based on that scenario with a definition on affirmative consent, if the person didn't say yes, then that would be, at least for us, a violation of sexual misconduct policy.
Hi, Danny.
Hi.
Could I ask you a question, Danny?
Yeah.
So I know a lot of people who were sexually assaulted on their college campus, and when they went to the department, they discouraged them from going to the police. And I'm just asking, like, why does that happen?
Mm-hmm.
And like, how come some universities discourage the victim from going to the police?
I can say from my experience, what we train and what every campus that I've been on, and mind you, I've been on 5 different campuses. We are required. So under the Title IX policy and the direction of the Department of Education, anyone who is a responsible employee, so anyone that a student would have a reasonable belief that that person has a requirement to report, is designated as a responsible employee and would have to report, right? The flip side of that is that we have to give students resources, and one of those resources are where you can report. And so we are trained to say, if someone came to me and said that they've been sexually assaulted, that I would have to tell them, would you like to make a formal report with the college? You need medical attention. Would you like to report this to the police? If you're looking for confidential resources, you have the counseling center, like a rape crisis center that's in our area. That is how we are trained. So if an employee at really any college, most schools have gone in the direction of saying that all employees are responsible employees. Keep in mind that this has been shifting year after year. Each administration makes their own policies and gives their own directives to colleges. But they're moving in the direction that all employees are responsible employees. And so everyone has a responsibility to report. I would say most professionals, for me, it's not about encouraging or discouraging. It is placing all of your options on the table, right? Oftentimes sexual assault is about power. So we want to give power back to the survivor and give them the opportunity to make their decisions, right? So I wouldn't say you should really talk to the police or you shouldn't talk to the police. I would say I'm more than happy to contact the police to help that if you would like to file a report, or the Rape Crisis Center can help you if you want to get in contact with law enforcement and advocate for you in that way. So it's about providing the resources. But I would say anyone who discourages someone from reporting to the police, that person should really take that situation up with the Title IX coordinator on the campus. Every campus has a Title IX coordinator required to by law, and explaining that that's what their experience is.
I just may add one thing, which may also go to this, Liz. Under the law, when anything's reported to the police, It goes into a database for every university. And there may be some universities who do not want those statistics to get out because they encourage or discourage people from going to that university. Say your daughter was going or son, and you saw there was a lot of that going on campus being reported. You may not want your child to go to that school. So listen, there are great universities and there's people who are above board, and then there are people who are not. So that could be a circumstance as well when it's not reported. But anyway, going back to Allie, go ahead.
Okay. I'm really glad that that did actually confuse everybody, because it definitely confused me when I was researching all of this. And I just think you're going to see a big difference between how difficult it is to define consent versus how easy it is for the legal system to define sexual assault. And the definition I got for that was, it refers to sexual contact or behavior that occurs without explicit consent from the victim. These are things like fondling or unwanted sexual touching or forcing someone to perform sexual acts, or obviously like penetration. And I thought an interesting thing that was actually, it was like highlighted and made a big deal on a couple of the websites I found, because I think it's a very basic thing that people like know in the back, like on a common sense level when it comes to this thing. But I think in the moment people like don't realize it. And it was that rape is a form of sexual assault. However, not all sexual assault is rape. And I think that it was just really interesting that this was a main point of a couple of articles that I have read. And I think it is because the line gets blurred so much when things, especially in a college campus, like alcohol and drugs are involved. And the Pennsylvania state law defines it as a person engaging in sexual intercourse or deviant sexual intercourse with another person without their consent. From what I found, just to define deviant sexual intercourse is just like things like sexual assault, like unwanted touching and other sexual acts, things like that. Anyone else? Is that a lot easier to understand than the consent definition?
Not really, because it all goes back to what consent is, and with or without consent, it just brings up the same problems we had before.
I just thought the wordings of it were so interesting that they're throwing these big words out and they're keeping such short things for consent. But when it comes to actually discussing what sexual assault and rape are, they have no problem with saying like, oh, it's this, this, and this, but they don't have consent. But it's like, if you don't understand what consent is, all of this kind of doesn't, I don't know how to explain it. It's just something that like stuck out to me.
It's like when we talk about the word reasonable is the formation of almost everything in the criminal and civil system, and we have no clue what that word means. So it's similar in that.
And in reality, oh no, I'm sorry, you keep going.
No, I'm sorry, go ahead, Tony.
I was gonna say also, it's like kind of like they want to put people behind bars. We see our privatized prison systems and like the money that it's making, and it's like our fastest growing economic business. So it's not really surprising that they're trying to keep all these crimes so basic and bland. So everybody falls under that category to be punished.
Okay. Anybody else have anything they want to, any questions about it? Okay.
Sure.
Oh, someone say something.
No, go ahead.
Just making sure. Can't see everybody, so if I like hear something, it throws me. And kind of the main point of my whole project was the stigmas that are around this, because this is obviously one of the most controversial type of crimes that we see, because it is something that if there is no like DNA evidence, if there are no like eyewitnesses or like, God forbid, like a recording or something like that, it all comes down to he said, she said in like a hetero case. But some of the most like common stigmas that we all hear are, well, what were you wearing? How much did you have to drink? Like you were flirting with him or her all night. Well, she was into it at first. She was asking for it, things like that. And it's just, if nothing else from all of this, I want like future classes, if they do pick up on this, to just take small or big steps if they can, like as time changes, to try to reduce those stigmas. I know it's hard to change people's perception of something like this because it is so controversial, but I think the two biggest ones are the ones I have bolded, and that's a woman can't assault or rape a man, and that women can't be sexual predators. Just because they're not as often as men, or they're not caught as often as men, does not mean that it doesn't happen to some men. And I think that that's really important. And I had a couple statistics. There was a website and it had everything from 2000 to 2018 as far as reported rape or sexual assault victims in the United States. And as they only had up to 2018, but it's 600,000. So 652,676 reported female victims and 81,956 reported male victims. And I just thought that that was like a very like blaring statistic at one, how often this happens to women and how often they're reporting it. And I was honestly shocked to see the number of male victims that reported that high, because you rarely hear about cases like that. And then another one was that women are 3 times more likely to be assaulted on a college campus, but they had no statistics for men on this. And I looked at a couple different sites and a few different articles, and I couldn't find any college assault or rape statistics for men, and I thought that that was kind of wrong, personally. I don't know if anyone else wants to chime in how they feel about that.
I want to just clarify that although there's not a lot of statistics, it's because men are more likely to not report that it happens. So we don't have any hard numbers on how many male students are more likely to be assaulted, because there's not a lot of male reports that partially because of all of the stigma that exists both around sexual assault, if the woman is the person who was the aggressor, or if the person was male and was assaulted by another male. There's also a bunch of stigma that's associated with that. So women are more likely to report, and they do report at a higher rate than men, but that doesn't mean that men don't experience it at a significant rate.
I wanted to post like kind of a screenshot of the picture. My laptop's kind of an older model, so it was kind of fighting me on the quality of being able to see it. But some of the stats were in like the triple digits for men even. One of the years was 2012, I believe, for reported cases. And then you see just a massive drop off after that. And it kind of stays like a steady between like 30 to 80,000 reported victims. And I also think that comes down to a stigma of, if it is a man and a woman and the man's the victim, he's often not seen as the victim, because in theory, all men want sex and like they never reject women. That's one stigma. And then what you brought up, if it is like 2 men and one of them isn't out as gay or is questioning or doesn't know what his sexuality is yet, like then he's just automatically labeled as gay and like he wanted it, and it turns into an even more traumatic event for that person. And I just think that that's so wrong. That's one of the main reasons why I chose this topic as well, and the main reason I wanted like men to be a part of this conversation and to hear it, because I think one of the other biggest stigmas around this issue is that it's always seen as a feminine or like a feminist issue, and that men are always the predators and they're always wrong, and like it's a big anti-men thing when that should not be the case at all. So again, my laptop wasn't great with screenshotting, but just like a quick rundown of my SurveyMonkey results, it only gave me 40 of the responses, and I was going to try to get some more surveyed results, but Corona kind of interfered with that. The first 2 were just pretty general. Like the age range was a basic college age range between 18 to 22. 22 female responders, 18 male, and no one checked the box for that they didn't want to disclose or anything like that. An interesting stat that I got from my survey was, do you feel as though you know what consent means? And 40 out of 40 said they all knew what it meant. And I think if they looked at that first slide and went through what we just did, everyone would say no, because it doesn't make sense if you really try to break it down, legally speaking. And then kind of an open-ended question. I just picked kind of what I thought was the best response that I got. And someone wrote that their definition was being explicitly told repeatedly that any physical interaction with a partner is allowed. I thought that was a pretty good definition and a less confusing way to word it. Next one was just a little bit more of a personal question, but I think it obviously plays a role. Have you or someone you know ever experienced an unwanted sexual encounter? And I didn't expect a result as striking as this, but I got 33 yeses and only 7 no's.
Wow.
And if I felt like paying for the membership to SurveyMonkey, it probably would have been different. But out of those 40, I thought that that was really striking and terrifying, being a college student. And then the next one kind of shifts more into Jefferson's policies and what they're doing with the school, what they're doing with their students regarding sexual assault. Do you feel as though Jefferson University has done enough to educate you on the importance of consent? And I thought this was kind of striking too. 31 said yes and only 9 said no. Which brought me to my final question of, what do you think the university could do better or do more of to educate its students? Again, I'm kind of like weaving through results, but one that I thought was the best of them, or the most clear, was to offer consent seminars, workshops, or activities every year instead of just once at freshman orientation. And I thought that was really important, the freshman orientation part, because everyone's gone to it and they have all seen the T video. And I think that that was the biggest takeaway from everyone after that portion of orientation, because we're only in there for an hour. They show this video that kind of makes a joke out of it. I understand like it's not meant to be taken as a joke, but they're trying to make light of a serious situation because it is like heavy for people to talk about. But I feel like to just do that once in your 4 years and to not really formally address it again, I just feel like we could be doing a little bit more, and I'll get more into that in my next slide. But I was just wondering what all of your feedback was on some of these results.
When I went, we never had that in orientation. I'm listening. One of the questions I was going to ask is if they even give a seminar. I don't remember anything about sexual harassment when I went as a freshman. So I'm actually kind of shocked that they have that at all. I don't know if anyone, I'm on an iPhone, so this is all different.
So Rachel, when we were in undergrad, a lot of this has changed. Right. So part of the shift happened around 2012 after the Penn State scandal. That was one of the big pushes because a lot of things changed. And then in 2014, they passed the Campus Save Act, which then added a requirement that all colleges receiving federal funding had to offer education around this topic.
Okay.
So, and as an orientation leader back then, we didn't talk about it at all.
Okay.
What do you guys think? Do you think that you received sufficient information from the school? Allie, obviously your roundtable, start with you.
No, I don't. And like, I'm not saying it as to try to take a jab at the university, but I feel like they kind of did the bare minimum of it. Like they did sit us down and we had like, I think it was about an hour long conversation, I'll say. We weren't really asked questions from what I remember. They were just kind of giving us definitions and things like that. And then they showed the video. And it is a funny video to watch, but like, these are kids fresh out of high school, a majority of them. They're 17 to 19 years old. They see a video of a cartoon guy offering tea to a woman who's unconscious, and it was just like, if she's unconscious, things like that. And like, it's nice because it kind of released some of the tense energy, but then just being immature and being in your teens, early 20s, like it kind of shifted the attention of being like, this is something to take serious and something that's kind of a joke, in my opinion. And then it was, in my 4 years at least, it hasn't been formally addressed beyond a quick thing when you're doing your freshman, what's it called, like hall meetings to address like hall rules and things like that for people who were in like Ronson or Partridge.
Liz, what do you think? What was your experience?
Yeah, I actually voted like no for the Has Jefferson, like, did they do enough? I just think that it's just talked about once and then it's kind of like pushed to the back. And I think it's something way more like important to talk about, because I think a lot of people don't understand what consent means, and a lot of people like will perform acts without consent, but they don't know that they're actually sexually assaulting someone because maybe like the other person is too like afraid to say something. And I also think that the question like, have like someone you know ever experienced unwanted sexual encounters, like I think it's scary that 30 people voted yes, because I feel like Ali said before, sexual assault isn't always rape, and I think it's like kind of just like a norm to like speak to like anyone and be like, oh, like yeah, like I've been like touched before, like unwantingly, like not necessarily like during like sex or something, but like it's like scary how like kind of like a norm it is now.
Okay, Ali, move it on because we have limited time, a lot to cover. Really interesting topic.
Yep. Almost done. 2 more slides.
Go ahead.
This is the best quality I could get for a screenshot, but I thought it was important to at least use these 2. These are straight from the Jefferson University page. It's their policies. All you have to do is type in like sexual assault policies. I did cut it down quite a bit. There are sections. A lot of the middle of it was if you want to file charges or file like a formal complaint and like the steps you can take for that. I just think it speaks to more confusing language, because for the definition section, it says sexual offenses include rape, statutory rape, involuntary deviant sexual intercourse, indecent exposure, indecent assault, and aggravated indecent sexual assault. And these may be directed against another person against his or her will, or a person who is incapable of giving consent. And I feel like the terms are the most confusing part of that, because I personally have never heard of indecent assault and aggravated indecent sexual assault. I don't even really understand what the differences are from those. But then I kind of highlighted 2 more really important sections that I found from this section, where it says educational programs. Says educational programs are provided by the university's Department of Security, the college's offices of student affairs, the student res life office of the Department of Housing and Res Life, and some by student run like clubs and organizations. And it says that they are widely advertised on campus. Personally, I've seen posters and flyers here and there with statistics and things, and I've heard of like other roundtables or other events occasionally, but again, being here for 4 years, I haven't really seen anything beyond those flyers. I think that they're a great first step, and it's great that these resources are here. I think they're important, but I didn't know that a lot of these were here or that these were options. And had I not done this project, I don't think I would have. And I think that that's wrong.
I was just gonna say, I think like out of all 4 of the years that like we've been here, I feel like right now is the most that I've ever seen Jefferson like push anything about sexual assault. Like I don't know if anyone's like looked at their emails and stuff since we've been home, but I guess it's like sexual assault either like awareness month or week or something like that, because they've been sending out like those like student engagement emails with like a bunch of stuff on it. But it's just kind of odd that like they would do it so much now this year, like more so now than they have in the, like I don't know, it's just kind of weird because like there's not even events being held. Like there was like a Zoom call or something you could join, I think like the other day I saw something about it, but like I've never seen like big events and stuff like that like on campus when we've been there in the past.
I noticed that too. Like April is Sexual Assault Awareness Month. I'm not sure what year that originally started and became a thing. But I have noticed a lot more emails about it and a lot more interaction. And I also thought it was weird because we're not even on campus now, and I'm getting more information about it than I was on campus. So I agree with that.
Honestly, when you look at the statistics about the quarantine, like sexual assault and all these like misconducts are actually going up because people are stuck with abusive family members and stuff like that. So maybe the Zoom calls are just like an outlet for these people and especially because it is Sexual Assault Month. So honestly, I think that those Zoom calls make sense.
I definitely think it's a good thing. I was just saying, like, in the past 3 years, like, I haven't seen this big of a push for anything about anything, like, at Jefferson and, like, now. I mean, it's a good thing that they're doing it, but that's the most I've ever seen it.
And the last section that I highlighted was the support services. For those who have like come forward and said that they wanted to like seek like some form of counseling, it says that counseling through the University Health Service and referrals to organizations to such organizations as Women Organized Against Rape. I think that those are great resources to have. Personally, I have used the counseling services here at school, and I think they are really helpful. Most of them, the ones I've experienced, not trying to bash any other counselors. But I thought that it was interesting that it mentioned organizations like Women Organized Against Rape, because I did not know that that was also an option that the university offered, that they even did referrals like that. So I thought that that was also like a really good thing and like positive step that the university is making. I just feel like these sections I've highlighted are so important, and like we just aren't informed enough about them by our university overall.
You know, Ali, I think the numbers are horrific, and just the small study you had was shocking. 75% almost, or more, 78% said yes, which is incredible. I was wondering, involve Danny in this as well, what can the university do better on this in order to bring these numbers down?
I think so. There's multiple layers to the issue. One is that high numbers doesn't necessarily, for me, high numbers isn't necessarily a bad thing. High numbers means that there's more people that are reporting, which is what we want, is more people to report that that's happening. So sometimes people see the high numbers and they're like, oh my God. But when a school has 0 reported sexual assaults, I doubt that that's an accurate number and people aren't reporting. I think that, pervasive education around consent and sexual assault, I think that's needed. The caveat to that is that most schools aren't resourced enough to be able to offer that. And that becomes part of the problem, right? Is that who's responsible for providing this education? Is it Res Life? Is it student engagement? You find that Title IX coordinators are oftentimes folks at colleges that are serving double duty, that they're the Title IX coordinator, the person responsible for overseeing the sexual misconduct process, but they may also be the head of HR or the dean of students. And so their focus is constantly shifted. I think what you see at larger institutions, public institutions, is that they have a more robust Title IX office that's just managing the complaints and the process. They have things like a women's center or a gender center that is actively programming around it. I think what colleges need to do moving forward is to provide resources in this area, right? Otherwise, what's going to happen is it's going to fall on offices that are already overtaxed and students to help push these things forward. So that's my take. I think we have to as a society start informing students earlier, prior to them even getting to college, about topics like this. And we have to do everything that we can to normalize help-seeking behavior, to normalize going and reporting to someone, to normalize going to counseling, so that folks can get the support that they need. And I mean, that's all my opinion, but that's what I think.
That kind of fit perfect to my wrap up final slide. These are ideas taken. I don't know if they are realistic possibilities, a couple of them, but I thought that they showed like really good initiative for possibilities, like how to move forward with a topic like this. One is a mandatory or required course as part of the curriculum, something similar to like your first year seminar class was how it was explained to me by one person who did this survey with me. Because in FYS, I think they briefly kind of address it, but it's just kind of in a quick, like, you have 50 minutes, let's kind of get everything all in. It's not a main topic of discussion. So I think just like an idea for like a 1 credit course per year, just like a pass fail, might be a good idea. What someone else said earlier in my survey results, like seminars, workshops, or activities annually beyond just the freshman orientation, because I think that personally it's odd that we have a sex toy bingo that's like the highlight of the year for everybody, but
They
we
still
don't.
do that?
Yeah, they do. I mean, everybody goes, everybody has fun, but like they don't know, all the people there don't even all understand consent. So I just think that it's an interesting contrast. And one thing which I would have loved to do more of, which was one of my big hiccups with coronavirus, was you could bring in outside organizations sometimes for these workshops and seminars and like roundtables or other activities. Like there's one in Philadelphia every year. There's the annual March to End Rape Culture. I've tried to go the past couple of years, but I've had basketball conflicts, so I haven't been able to. But everything I've looked up on their website and about the organization is that it's not a protest, it's just a march. It's not in Center City, I can't remember where it is, but it's just they block off a big portion, and they have public speakers, they have like survivors, other victims, people who are supporting them, they have performers, and it's just like every video I've seen and people I've talked to that have gone to it said that it was just a very like welcoming like experience, because it just makes all of the survivors feel like validated. It just is a very like positive like empowering environment for men or women or whatever gender they identify as. And another one that I thought was interesting that I saw in the survey results was offering extra credit options for sexual assault initiatives on campus. So like if the professors wanted to do something, like have their own separate assignment and just say, if you want to find a way to create like some type of activity to promote awareness and things like that, which I also thought was one of the more realistic options for the future. But yeah, so that's all I have.
I think making the university, if indeed our culture, safe for people in their interactions with the opposite sex or with the same sex in sexual situations is extremely important, because it could do a lot of damage. And people have been damaged by this psychologically and physically. And the more we know, and as you started all this out, the gray areas, which confusion leads to a bad situation. So I totally agree with you that these things should be implemented on campus. Want to thank our guests, our alumni, Ray and Danny. Thank you so much for coming. And you'll be contacted soon by Dee Dee, because we're forming the Royal Council of Elders, which I'm sure you'll be part of and a big part of. And thank you, everybody. I'm going to stop recording, and we'll go offline, right?